What's going on, guys? Tower number 9 here, and Fun Deck Fridays is back. It's a little late in the evening, but I think this is technically going to release on Friday. And today we have Green Ray Mandalorian. So in my search for a Mandalorian theme deck, I went to a kind of unexpected place. And so Green Ray is going to be the leader in base here, and let's explain a bit. So a lot of the Ray decks have been using either aggression or double blue. But it seems to me that Rey has more applications than that. A lot of the Mandalorian units have synergy with her, in my opinion. So they have low base attack values a lot of the time, and that means that Rey's ability is good for scaling up, since she can give experience tokens to units with 2 or less power. You know, if you have one of these units like the, Sundari Peacekeeper has 1 base power, so you can potentially buff it twice with Rey, and it's honestly a good unit to begin with. And additionally, the upgrade synergies work well with those experience tokens. So experience tokens are upgrades. So for something like the Follower of the Way, which needs to have an upgrade to get its stat bonus, Rey provides a really reliable way to do that. So is this necessarily going to be like a top tier super competitive deck? Probably not, but I think it's really cool, and I think it's stronger than you might expect. So let's take a look at these particular cards, and also I want to give a shout out to the local community here in the Bay Area. I think I originally got the idea for this build based on some talk after a draft or a pre-release or something like that. I don't remember the exact context or who said it, but people were discussing some different builds and stuff, and this came out of that, and I've been testing it out a bit. I think it's pretty cool. So Follower of the Way, I already mentioned this card, but so 2 for a 1/3 is bad. But while this unit's upgraded, it gets +1/+1, which means that it's, while upgraded, it's essentially 2 for a 2/4, which is not bad. Now, the problem with this is that there isn't usually a very reliable way to enable that condition, because you have to draw an upgrade that would be worth playing on it and so on. But Rey gives you a really reliable way. So if you use Rey's ability, just give it +1/+1, now you have a 3/5. And you can do that the turn after you play it. Now, you are still vulnerable to an ambush, so someone might use Energy Conversion Lab and ambush you with a Battlefield Marine before you can buff or whatever, which would be pretty bad. And when you're going second, there are a fair few starting plays that can take this out and remain alive, which is not where you want to be, but it is more reliable here than it is in other decks. I still think this unit could probably use an extra point of stats, but Rey uses it well. One note is that when you give it the experience token, you then also get the passive ability here, which means that you are now out of range of Rey's ability. So you can't use Rey to give this 2 buffs, because the first buff essentially takes it all the way to being a 3/5 because the passive gets activated. If you keep a hand with 2 2-cost units, you can use this better because you can play the Follower of the Way on the first turn. Then on the second turn, you can buff the Follower of the Way and play a 2-cost unit. Another good combo is to just use the Mandalorian Warrior to buff it immediately while also developing a unit. And later on in the game, it can synergize with the Armorer and with Darksaber. It's kind of funny that I'm highlighting this again, because I don't think this card is all that good. But this deck and the previous Blue Sabine build both have ways to enable it that might make it worthwhile. So, let me know how you find this. Next up, we have the Protector of the Throne, and I call it Follower of the Way's sibling in inefficiency, because Protector of the Throne, like Follower of the Way, I think could really use an extra point of stats. 3 for a 2/4 with Conditional Sentinel is really bad when you consider that there's 3 for a 2/4 with Unconditional Sentinel in the form of Cloud City Wingguard, and people don't play that card very much. But there is one thing that Protector of the Throne has going for it, and that is the Mandalorian trait. And so in this deck, the Mandalorian synergy might be worth it. I don't know for sure, but I'm giving it a shot. I'm testing it out. I think if it ends up not working out, very easy to cut this for the Village Protectors or the Cloud City Wingguard, who are unconditional sentinels at a similar price point. But I like trying to make this work, and I do think the Armorer in particular is really good with this. If you play this and then have the Armorer give it that shield, that not only gives it Sentinel, it means that you now have a shielded Sentinel to deal with. You can also just, buff it with Rey to enable it much more reliably. There's a fair few things that you can do here. It is a bit slow compared to other Sentinels, and I could see this getting cut from a later version of the deck, but I do like trying to make stuff like this work, and I do think there's at least an argument for it, given the Mandalorian synergies with things like the Armorer, Darksaber, and the Mandalorian Warrior. So then last card I want to highlight is the Sundari Peacekeeper. I touched on this a little bit earlier, but this is already a good card, and it goes really well with Ray to boot because you can potentially use Ray on this guy twice. It's a really annoying obstacle for opponents that are trying to go aggro against you because they probably can't afford not to kill it, or else you will have too much restore, but 5 HP is kind of annoying, and it doesn't die to open fire or aggression. So Yoda has kind of a similar role sometimes. He's 3 for a 2/4 with restore 2. And I think 3 for a 1/5 with raid 2 restore 2 is actually more annoying for an aggro deck to deal with than Yoda is, especially because open fire and aggression hit for 4. Now, the low base power is kind of a downside in that it renders you a bit vulnerable if you get attacked, but with Rey it can kind of be turned into an upside because it gives you more chances to buff this unit. You can use her ability on this twice instead of just once, and it is also a Mandalorian for your other synergies. It can be a good target for Energy Conversion Lab in the early game, and I think this card is really strong and one of the ones that is most nice to have with Rey's ability here. So let's move on from these card highlights onto the overall deck composition. So the deck is called Surprise It's Mandalorians because it's not necessarily what you would most think of Rey as being about, but I have a few copies of Covert Strength, which can provide healing and experience and can be smuggled. We have the good old Restored Arc 170, which you can buff. We have the Battlefield Marine, which Rey can't buff, but is just a really good card. The Clan Ren Rescuer. I think in this deck it can be especially nice to play the Clan Ren Rescuer and buff a different unit, because then the Rescuer itself can be buffed twice, potentially by Rey. We have the Follower of the Way, which I mentioned earlier, 2 copies of Mandalorian Armor to give another buff and a shield, 3 copies of the Concord Dawn Interceptors. So I often think of this as kind of a sideboardy card against smaller fighters, but again, with Rey it's a lot better because the card's offensive weakness can be mitigated by giving it experience tokens with Rey's ability, so you're not stuck with this guy that's just swinging for 1, you can buff it up and be hitting for 2 or 3. Sundari Peacekeeper and Protector we touched on, Mandalorian Warrior, just a nice synergy card. We do have 2 copies of Takedown here to provide some removal, 3 copies of the Darksaber, which is kind of the premier Mandalorian synergy card and goes great on Rey. We have 3 copies of the Armorer, who can shield your other Mandalorians, 3 Rogue Squadron Skirmishers, which provide a ambush unit, a kind of more expensive option, and can bring back some of your 2-cost stuff, 3 copies of Rival's Fall to deal with powerful leaders or other dangerous late-game things, 3 copies of Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight, who's just a great card, 3 U-Wings, and 2 Home Ones. So this deck does have kind of the multiple unit or recursion package with Rogue Squadron Skirmisher, U-Wing Reinforcement, and Home 1, which can help it fight against control decks. The main thing you have to worry about against a control deck is if they can get like an Avenger or a Snoke or something stuck on the board to suppress your other stuff, but you do have those Rivals Falls to potentially deal with that. In the sideboard, we do have 3 copies of Confiscate to deal with upgrade-based strategies, 2 copies of Devotion to help against aggro, 2 copies of Make an Opening to help against aggro or Boba decks that have a bunch of like 2 HP shielded things, which we sometimes see with Crafted Smuggler and not Evazon, 7th Fleet Defender. We have 2 copies of Razor Crest, which provides an additional unit to fight in space, also gives some recursion, also gives some restore. That is intended also for those anti-aggro matchups. And we have 1 copy of Home 1 to give us more recursion in the more endgamey builds. Is this the best deck ever? Probably not, but I've been having fun with it, and I think it's surprisingly good relative to what you might expect for the weird combination, and it is a Mandalorian theme deck as well. I'm all about trying to get those Mandalorian theme decks working, so this is one attempt at that. And I have a few final thoughts here. So I honestly think I might be overdoing it with the synergy. Yes, it's a Fun Deck Fridays deck, and I like the Mandalorian theme, but I think there might actually be a real deck here with Rey Green that goes a little later on the Mandalorian synergy, takes more cards that are just generally good, like you play the Village Protectors instead of playing the Protector of the Throne, for instance. I think it's worth exploring overall. Rey to me seems to have a lot of versatility and a lot of ability to make dubious cards stronger because of the way her ability synergizes with cards with lower power, just the power, the stat. And that said, this Mandalorian version is cool and fun. I might have to have an update to this later on with like the more competitive version if I do end up developing a one that goes less heavily on the synergy. But one other thing that I was thinking is that I honestly think Rey Yellow might work too. Just thinking about different units and stuff, there are some cool units that a yellow Rey deck could run. We could see things like Crafty Smuggler, for instance, seems to go great with Rey's ability, potentially There are a lot of weird little spots where Ray's ability can make a unit that maybe isn't that strong to begin with a lot more powerful and relevant. And I'm interested in exploring that further, both with this sort of, Ray green Mandalorian type deck. We'll see, but Ray yellow, Ray green non-Mandalorian, and so on. I think Ray is a very cool and interesting leader. Okay, so those are my thoughts on this build. I'm just curious, what do you think? Do you think this is a stupid idea? Do you think this is fun, but you would rather play a Mandalorian leader if you're doing a Mandalorian synergy deck? Do you think this is great? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Also, if you have any suggestions for other sorts of things to potentially do for Fun Deck Fridays, let me know in the comments, and I will have a look. It is a little based on sort of my own caprice and like things that I find interesting, so I can't guarantee that I'm going to do a video on every deck that somebody recommends, or even any of the decks that someone recommends necessarily, but at the same time, I do appreciate hearing suggestions for what might be cool to try out. So thanks again for watching, guys, and we will be back later with more Star Wars Unlimited content. I will catch you guys later.